Well, it's looking tough for Bush, particularly, again, as we say, what happens to Pennsylvania and New Hampshire. If Al Gore wins Pennsylvania and New Hampshire, then he really only has to pick up one more state of those white states to win. None of them are simple, but the odds are then with him.
We now project that Pennsylvania, in fact, is going to go to Mr. Gore. So that gives him the big three. That gives him Florida and Michigan and Pennsylvania. Those were the toughest battleground states of the year, and ABC News now projects that Mr. Gore has won in Pennsylvania. We're going to go away to our local news stations all the way across the country now so they can bring you up to date on the local races, but this is very tight. We hope you'll stay with us.
This is ABC News continuing coverage of the 2000 vote. Now reporting from New York, Peter Jennings.
Welcome back to our political coverage of election 2000. It's turning out to be quite a ride. We're now able to make a couple more projections. We're going to go first to the presidential race in the state of Ohio. And ABC News now projects that the winner in Ohio is Mr. Bush. 21 electoral votes. Crucial state in presidential politics, especially for the Republicans. No Republican has ever been elected without carrying the state of Ohio. We project it for Mr. Bush. And in Tennessee, 11 electoral votes. Nashville, Tennessee, the headquarters of the Gore campaign tonight, Mr. Gore's home state. The last time a presidential candidate won the election but lost his home state was Woodrow Wilson in 1916. Al Gore has lost in Tennessee tonight. 30 years ago, his father, Albert Gore Sr., lost his seat in Tennessee. Here's the electoral vote count at the moment. It could not be closer. 185 for Mr. Bush and 183 for Mr. Gore. So let's take a look at the big map, because that's what it looks like at the moment. Beginning to move west, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, still too close to call. Mr. Bush beginning to enhance his bastion in the south and beginning to pick up some wins in the Midwest and as we go farther west. Let me bring in both George Stephanopoulos and Mark, because as we look, Mark Halperin, our political director, because as we look at that map now, what does Mr. Bush do next?
Well, Mr. Bush has
must do next, I should say.
Must do. It's starting to work against him. Let me turn it around and say how I think Gore can put it together, and maybe Mark can talk. If Gore now has 183, you believe they've been comfortably ahead in California, so that should get them up to about 237. They also hope they can get Washington. That takes them to 248. Minnesota, 258. Maine gives them to 262. Then they have to put together, I said before, New Hampshire, plus one of those other states down in the left corner, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, or if they can pull it out, Wisconsin, Missouri, or Iowa. One of those other states after they pick up New Hampshire.
Okay, George, I can make a call just while you're saying there. ABC News now projects that Minnesota goes for Mr. Gore, the only state to have voted Democratic in the past 6 elections, been very competitive in October. That puts in another piece for Mr. Gore. Let me go to Mark Halperin, but remind you first that the AFL-CIO political director, Steve Rosensteel, says they've now shifted as much of their phone banks as they can to New Mexico, to Arizona, and to Colorado. So pick up the story.
Well, George's list is right. New Mexico has always been a swing state. It's one that's been fiercely competed over by these two campaigns. The surprises, though, obviously Steve Rosenthal, the AFL-CIO, has picked up that Gore is surprisingly competitive in both Colorado and Arizona, states that are generally Republican, but Bill Clinton won each of them once, and they're making an effort there. They just need to find, they think, one more state to win this. Of course, there's some West Coast states that haven't been called, but they think if they find one more, they'll win.
Let me go back to you, George, and take you back to your old days when you actually worked in that business, and you were in a war room in a situation like this.
Peter, let me say one thing.
Yeah.
There has never been a situation, or there hasn't been a situation like this in an awful long time. All the presidential campaigns I worked in, 88 through 96, you knew the result going into the last night. This is shaping up to be the closest electoral college result since 76, and nobody's seen anything like this in a long time.
I take your point, but wish to ask, if you're in campaign headquarters in Nashville or in Austin tonight, and you're looking at this, do you really think you can affect something going on elsewhere in the country at this late hour?
In the close races, yes. There's a small chance that at the margins you might be able to get a few more voters out or create some momentum. I think some of the thinking will go in a different direction, though. Once this map is set, you're going to bring the lawyers in. And they're going to start to look at all these states, see if there were any voting irregularities, see if any of them are close enough to go for an automatic recount. That's where the action's going to be, the lawyers, not the strategists.
Now, all the states so far which have appealed to keep polling places open have all been denied by judges, so you give up on that one. But how do you begin to shift these enormous banks of phones and emails and everything? How do you shift them in a moment like that?
Well, you're not really talking about that much at this point. You're only calling into a few states there in the West. What they do is they just go to their volunteers and just give them a new list of automatic phone numbers.
So the national headquarters have automated lists for all of the states.
And the AFL-CIO has, and then each state, if their phone banks are still set up, all you need to do is give them new phone numbers.
Okay, George, thank you very much. Now let us go to Mr. Bush's headquarters and just get a flavor of the place at this hour from ABC's Ron Claiborne, who's covered the campaign for many months. Ron?
Peter, this crowd has been very subdued up until this point. I think they're really stunned by the string of victories that the vice president has put together in the early returns here. They have gotten quite excited of late over the projected victory in the state of Ohio, and in particular in Al Gore's home state of Tennessee.
Okay, and now let's go to Mr. Gore's campaign headquarters in Nashville and ABC's Terry Moran. The mood.
Well, Peter, it's something of the opposite feeling here as these big victories come in for Al Gore. There is a sense not just of happiness, but almost of surprise on the part of this crowd. This was a campaign which really hoped it could win, which worked its heart out to win. But I must say, over the past couple of weeks, deep down you could sense that people were readying themselves not to win. And this sense that he is putting together a string of victories that could carry him to the ultimate victory has released not just joy but surprise here. And this is a campaign that was really, like as Mark Twain said about art, 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. These people worked hard for this, and if it comes home for them, they'll be very happy indeed.
Now, Terry, you're one step removed, obviously, from the innards of this at the moment, but do you have any sense of them trying to work out west and trying to make a difference at this late hour?
Absolutely. Just characteristic of the entire Gore campaign. Right up until the last minute, they will be calling. They'll be calling radio stations, as you pointed out, doing absolutely anything he can for the last possible vote.
Okay, Terry, thanks very much. That's the mood at both of the headquarters. Let's go to Lynn Sure now. As you know, just a few minutes ago, we projected that Pennsylvania would go for Mr. Gore, giving him the trio of the big battleground states. Lynn, in Pennsylvania, what made the difference?
What made the difference, Peter, was a couple of very specific groups. First of all, older voters. Those over 65 years of age, they comprised about 19% of the voting population. And in Pennsylvania, older voters split this way. 60% went for Mr. Gore, only 38% for George Bush. Another very important group of voters for Al Gore, those living in Philadelphia and voting there. Today, the voters of Philadelphia divided their vote this way: 80% for Al Gore, only 18% for George Bush. Two very important groups for him. One more thing I want to tell you, Peter. Al Gore didn't win on the #1 candidate quality that was cited by voters in Pennsylvania today. They said it was honesty, and those voters voted for George Bush. But he did very well with the #2 quality, experience, also his ability to handle complex issues, and his empathy, his ability to understand the needs of voters like you, like the person casting the ballot. These are the issues, the qualities that gave Al Gore his victory in Pennsylvania today. Peter?
Lynn, one more question for Pennsylvania. Guns, NRA, this is another state where the National Rifle Association put in enormous effort.
And I'll tell you, I was there and heard both candidates campaigning there. Guns came up every time. I am sorry to tell you, it is not a question on our exit poll there today.
Okie doke, thanks very much. We'll come back to you a little later for more about Pennsylvania. But this is a state where labor's played an enormous role. 70,000 people joined labor unions in the last decade, and so the labor union, they're working very well. Earlier in the night, it was thought that Philadelphia was not turning out as well as the Gore people had liked, but we now project that Pennsylvania has gone for Gore, and Sam has a Senate call. Sam.
Well, in Minnesota, big one here, the Democrats have picked up a seat. ABC News projects that the state auditor, Mark Dayton, who is heir to the Dayton department store fortune, has defeated first-term Republican Senator Rob Graham. Now, that means, Peter, that the Democrats have a net pickup tonight so far of 2 Senate seats. It was 54-46. They're edging toward what they hope will be a 5-seat pickup. the moment they don't have it, but they have a net of 2.
Okay, Sam, thanks very much. Be back in just a moment. I hope you'll stay with us as our election coverage continues. Take a look at the big map as it is at the moment. The red is Mr. Bush, the blue is Mr. Gore, and the white is yet to be decided. We'll be right back.
Take the ABC News American Election Challenge. Which state has chosen the winning presidential candidate most often? California, Kentucky, Wisconsin, New Mexico. In a moment, the answer. This ABC News special is being brought to you by Compaq.